Welcome back. This is going to be lesson 2 on my Scratch tutorial, and I'm going to get back into it. So in this video I'm going to show you how you can create an item, give it a variable so that when it can interact. I'm also going to show you how to create a simple background and also how to create some walls that you cannot walk through. All right, so looks as though I need to add something right off the bat. In the last video I did not set a costume for the start of the game, and so when I reset the game I want to start facing forward, so I just added that to my character sprite. So now when we left off last, we were able to move in all 4 directions with some animation. Alright, and so I'm also going to start off by renaming my sprite to player 1. I don't know if I'll ever be able to add a player 2, but we'll just call it player 1. Okay, and right here we'll hover over choose a sprite, and I'm going to select paint. So this is going to give me a whole new sprite, and I'm going to rename this sprite coin. Okay, and when I create just through paint, it gives me a blank costume, which I'm going to always go to bitmap as soon as I see the option. And I just really want to make this coin really quickly, so I'm just going to draw a circle. I'm not going to look for any sprite sheets for this right now or draw anything fancy. I just want it there. So now I have a coin, okay? And I also am going to give it a second costume that is just blank. So choose costume and select paint, and that will give me a new blank costume, and that's great. All right, and so the coin is there. I can walk up to the coin, but unfortunately when I touch the coin nothing happens. And of course you might be saying, yeah, because you got to give it some code, man. So there we go. We're going to go over to code. Yeah, when we make a new sprite, there's no code. So first, we're just going to grab your basic win flag clicked so that this will happen when we start the game. And just some things that we might want to think about. We might want to give the sprite an opening position. And so I can even drag this over and I can put it where I want. You know, you can put it anywhere on the screen, and then this go to right here will change the coordinates to what it is. Or you can just type them in, but we'll have it start there. All right, so when I click the game, it'll start there. And something else we'll do is we're going to create a variable, our first variable for our game. Well, it's no, second. We already have frame. So our second variable that we're going to create, and I'm going to call this coins. All right, and so it's a global variable. It's for all sprites, so it's called coins. All right, and I'm going to turn frame off at this point because this frame works just fine, so we don't need to highlight that anymore. All right, so next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some of this code right in here. So what I'll do is I'm going to go to control and say if then. Okay, so an if then statement, and then I'll go into sensing. And so if I'm touching player 1, all right, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch my costume to costume 2, and that tells me I need to set my costume to costume 1 at the start of the game. Okay, and then if I touch, and if you remember, costume 2 is just blank. All right, and also I want something with my variable. So first of all, I created a variable, so I need to set my variable to 0 to start the game. And I'm going to have it change, not set coins, but change coins by a +1. So I get 1 coin for every coin I touch. All right, and now I'll reset the game, and you'll see if I walk up to this coin, when I touch it, it'll switch to costume 2. But It's not working. I'm actually not sure what I did wrong yet. Oh, I am. Now I am. Once again, this is only if it happens right when I click the button I'm touching it. Otherwise, I wasn't touching it when I clicked the button. I forgot the most basic of everything. I need to put this in a forever loop. So, forever. Whoop, I put it in the wrong spot. Like a noob. Wow. Alright, so in a forever loop, now I'm going to hit reset. And now when I touch it, it turns into costume 2. And I'll reset. So what if I didn't put in switch costume to costume 1? Well, let me show you. So when I reset the game and I walk up to the coin, it disappears, but when I reset the game, it doesn't come back. See, it's stuck on costume 2. So we need to go back to costume 1 where the coin is to make it reappear. And next, why do we set coins to 0? Well, let me show you. So if I didn't set coins to 0 after I reset the game, so I reset the game and I walk up and I grab the coin, right? And I got 1 coin. Alright, well in my game right now it's real simple. The only thing you have to do is collect 1 coin. So if I reset the game, notice coins is still set at 1. So when I walk over to the coin, now I have 2 coins, but I only collected 1. And then if I reset the game, now I have 2 coins at the start. Now I think you get the picture. When you start the game, you should have no coins. So we're going to set that variable to 0. And that's pretty true of almost every variable. Like I said in the last video, sometimes you might not set it to 0, but almost always you will. Alright, and I'm already seeing an issue with my character and my item. See, look, I'm standing right where the coin would spawn when I reset. So I reset the game, and you can't even tell that I just collected a coin because I'm standing where the coin would spawn. And so that tells me that I need to change something here. I need my character to start at a specific spot. So same thing, I can drag my character wherever I want him. That's one way of doing this. Of course, there's lots of ways to do everything. But that gives me those coordinates in the go to X, go to Y, and I'm just going to put that right at the top of my player's code. I don't want to put it in the forever loop because I don't want, if I do that, I'm stuck at that spot and I can't go anywhere. But I do want to start the game there. That way, if I'm over here and I reset the game, I actually start right at the beginning, facing forward. Starting to look good. All right, so we have an item. We can walk up to it. It takes a minute to get to it. And we can collect it. We interact with it. So now let's start by adding a little bit of background. Now, your first thought would be to put it as a backdrop, but that won't work for what we're going to do in the future. So we're going to go to Sprite, and we're going to go to Paint, and we're going to create a whole new sprite. And I'm going to change the name to Ground. So this will be a ground sprite. So whatever we put on this page will be, and in its subsequent costumes will be ground. Alright, and I'm going to create another sprite for now, and we'll call this one Walls. Alright, so whole new sprites. They're totally blank. I just created them out of nowhere. There's nothing to them. They have no code. They have no costumes. Okay, so I'm going to go to the ground sprite, and I'm going to go to the costume that is loaded in. As you see, it's in vector. So I'm going to put it in the bitmap. And this is ground, so I'm going to select the color here, and I'm going to slide this to a green, and I want a little bit of darker green, let's say. And I'm going to click on the paint can, and I'm just going to paint the whole backdrop. And one of the things that you notice is that my character is gone, and my coin is gone. Well, it's not really gone. What's actually happening is because I made them after, now that's on top. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab in looks this go to back front layer, and I'm going to change it to back. And if I click it, it'll happen, but really what I want to do, obviously, is when I start the game, we're going to move this to the back layer. And another thing you'll see is it's not covering everything, and that's because, for whatever reason, it's not centered. We're going to actually put in this code to just center it right on 0, 0. Okay, so I'm going to change X and Y to 0, 0. And now when I reset the game, I have this green background, which is great. All right, so I have some ground. It's really close to this character's costume, but that's okay. We'll fix that later. We just have some background, and that's all that matters. We got the start. And now I'm going to click on my sprite called walls, and I'm going to give it a costume. Same thing, I'm going to click on convert to bitmap so I can draw this, and I'm going to use the rectangle. And I'm going to zoom all the way out, and I don't want to use green because if I use green, you won't be able to tell the difference. So I'm just going to give it a different color completely. So I'll go with red. And I'm going to change, you can change this later, but for right now, just to get the mechanics down, we can just create some walls really quickly with these rectangles. Okay, and so you can see I'm just clicking and dragging and creating some rectangles, and I'm not even taking care to do a real perfect job because I'm going to change this later. I just want to have the code in for you and show you how it works. Alright, so I have walls everywhere, and one of the things we'll notice is just like last time, this isn't centered, so I'm going to set it to 0, 0 again. With the event when click flag clicked, and I'm going to click that flag, and you can see I might have an issue here because when I start the game my character is just a little bit in the walls, and that's not going to work. So I'm going to go back to my character sprite, and at this point, you know, unless you put exactly everything that I've done, you may or may not be in the walls. It depends on if the game you're using and how you've coded it. So I'm just going to change this to like -110 instead of -123, and that'll move me outside the walls. So I'm inside the walls, I should say. All right. I can move still, and as you can see, I go right on through the walls. All right. One thing is, I actually, when I'm like standing in this position, like right here next to the walls, I shouldn't be like under them. I should be on top of them. So I'm going to go back to walls, and this is just kind of about looks. And I'm going to move it to the back, but I don't want to move it all the way to the back because, as you remember, the ground is set to the back. So if I go into looks, and towards the end is go to, and I'm going to say go to back layer. But I'm going to also have it go forward just one layer. So it's one layer in front of the ground. And now I'll reset, and you'll see that I'm actually on top of the walls. And that's not necessarily what I want here, but up at the top of the screen, it is definitely what I want, like this. Right? So if I was running along the side of the wall, I should be able to walk like this. Okay, but my walls, I'm actually walking right on through them. So we're going to give it a little bit of code so that we can't walk through the walls. All right, and I'm actually going to put this code on my main player. I'm not going to put it on the walls. I'm going to put it on the player. And I'm going to go into variables, and I'm going to create 3 variables real quick. I'm going to create a variable called last X, and that's for all sprites or global. And I'm going to create last Y, and that's also a global variable. Let's move coins like down here, and we'll look at last X and last Y. Right now we'll leave them showing because we're gonna, and just we don't need this for the right this second, but we're gonna make a variable while we're at it and call it costume. Okay, and we'll worry about that later too. So right now we're looking at last X and last Y. All right, and basically what we're going to do is we're going to say if I touch a wall, then I'm going to go back to where I was. And that's basically the code that we're going to write here. So in control, I'm going to grab an if then else statement. All right, and I'll just put it outside the code right now, just right now. Basically, then I'm going to go to sensing and say if I'm touching the walls, and that's why it's important that you name your stuff properly so that we can find it when we code. Naming sprites, naming costumes, it's really important to help you know what you're doing. So if I'm touching the walls, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to XY, and not just any XY, these new variables I created, last X and last Y. All right. Of course, now we haven't really set them to anything and that sort of thing. So right now that won't do anything. But what I'm going to say is, obviously, if I'm not, so I'm going to grab these two set coins and I'm going to change one to set XY and change set last X and last Y. And so what I'm inside every sprite, and I look at this kind of as its own built-in variable. So every sprite has this part in the motion, their X position and their Y position. So I'm going to drag that X position and then the Y position for the last Y. So basically what this says is, if I'm touching the walls, then go to last X and last Y. And you might say, well, what is last X and last Y? Well, last X and last Y are the X position and the Y position that I'm at. So basically what it's saying is, if I touch the wall, I'll go back to where I was. All right? And so I'm going to put this code right after all my movements. If you see this one little part right here, you can't tell from up above, but that's my forever loop. So I'm going to put it outside the movements, but inside the forever loop. Okay? And I'm going to hit reset. One more thing. I don't know how much this really matters, because as soon as we start the game, we set X and Y in that other code, but just because I'm just really, I just I just have to do this. If you create a variable, you should give it an opening value. And technically, really, what last X and last Y should be is whatever this is, to be honest with you, but it doesn't matter, because as soon as I start the game, one of the things you'll notice, let me change you see last X and last Y, as soon as I start the game, they become what this is anyways, because of this code. And what this code is saying is, don't worry about this if touching walls part, look at the else part. Basically, forever, I'm saying, if I'm not touching walls, then set these variables to where I am. And this right here at the very start of the game says set my X and Y coordinates to these two coordinates. So first, the program will say set my X and Y coordinates here to -120 and -110 or whatever I plug in there. And then it goes through all these if statements, but none of them are true because I'm not pushing any arrows or anything. I'm not touching any walls. So then it's going to set last X to last Y. Now, here's one issue. If I were to change this so that I was in the wall, I will get a glitch. So let's say -130 would be in the wall on my Y. So if I reset the game, it shouldn't be a surprise to you. I knew this was going to happen, but basically what it did was it tried to move my character here inside the walls. And because that was inside the walls, I never could be there, so it moved me to where last X and last Y were, and that I set to 0, 0. So now you see, well, maybe why you would set it to 0, 0. If there was some wall right there in the middle, that might become a problem, and my game would completely glitch out. So you just need to be mindful of where you're starting the game, where your walls are, that sort of thing. So for right now, that works. I can start the game at those coordinates. And now you'll see, when I walk up to the walls, I can't walk through them. I just kind of bounce off them. It's like, oh, I can't go there. And because basically what it's doing is it wants to move me there, but I'm touching a wall, so it moves me back to where I was. Right? So now we have some walls. But here's an issue. When I walk up here, it's like I should be able to walk a little further than that. This is just an aesthetic thing, like a graphics thing, but it's kind of important to me. Like, I should be able to walk higher than that. And so the workaround this is we're going to create a new costume inside my player. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it like right where my player is. So like, let's say I take this main front one, and I'm just going to duplicate it. It's not that important that I duplicate it, but it's just going to kind of show you what I'm doing. And I'm going to move that down because I want it at the very bottom. And I'm not going to call it front 3 though. I'm going to call this hitbox. Okay. And I'm going to take first I'm going to convert to bitmap, and then I'm going to delete a big portion of my guy, like that much. All right, and Then I'm going to select a square rectangle. I don't need to make this fancy. I'm going to make a block, and I'm going to make a little square like that big, right? Just like that, right? And everything else is extra, so I don't need any of this other stuff. So I'm just going to grab it and delete it. All right. I was just kind of trying to make it the hitbox be right at my feet. All right. So I'm going to eliminate any other colors. All right. So now I just have the hitbox. Okay. And so now I'm going to go into my code, and it's going to take me a second to work this out, but so basically what I'm going to do is before I touch the walls, I'm going to switch my costume to this hitbox, and then I'm going to switch it back so fast that you're not going to be able to see it. Okay, so I'm going to pull out switch costume in two different places, before and after. But before I switch to the hitbox, so I'm going to change this to, no, I can't change anything yet. Oh, no, yes I can. I have variable. So the second time, I'm going to set my costume, switch it back to whatever it was before I switched it to the hitbox. So here's the little trick. I'm going to say, in variables, I'm going to say set, and that variable we started at the beginning of this video, costume, I'm going to say set costume to, and then I'm going to go into looks, and I'm going to say set costume to costume number. So basically, what I'm saying here is set my costume to whatever it is right now. Set this variable costume to the costume I'm on. Then switch my costume to hitbox, and then if I'm touching walls, go to last X, last Y. Otherwise, change last X and last Y to my X and Y position. And then afterwards, switch back to the costume I had before. And what's going to happen is it's going to happen so fast that you're not even going to see that I'm switching to my hitbox. So you might notice if you do this, everything's kind of the same here. I still can't walk into walls, but the difference will be is when I go up here. And what you'll see is I'm actually able to, like, my head's touching the wall, right? Because really it's checking for the hitbox. I'll show you, like, if I take this part right out here out of there, you'll see what's going on. So it's like kind of sometimes hitbox, sometimes not. But you can kind of see that it's like it's basing it on where my hitbox is, and it won't let me. Now, if I, like, for instance, what if I wanted to move a little bit further up, because you can see the hitbox isn't exactly touching the wall. I could go into the costume of the hitbox, and this is when you're messing with it a little bit. I could take a little bit off the top, and it might actually let me go a little further. Yeah, see, now it lets me go further. I like that a little better. Okay, and I'm going to go back into my person's code, and I'm going to put this switch costume back to the costume I was in there, so that it stops like glitching like that. So I'm going to grab the coin just because I can, and and I'll show you. See, and so now we have a little bit of animation to our walls as well. They're not like, you know, we can actually walk next to the wall, and it looks a little better. So yeah, that's it for this lesson. I hope that helps you. In the future, I'll show you how to switch screens and, you know, add a little more to your game. But until then, keep looking for my next video.